The millionaire's autistic son was withdrawn until the gardener changed his life. Elizabeth Wilson felt her chest tighten when she heard the unmistakable sound. It was her son's laughter. For 3 years she hadn't heard that genuine sound, that pure joy every child should have. She dropped the papers she was holding and ran to the office window. What she saw left her frozen. There was Noah, her 5-year-old boy, sitting in a wheelbarrow in the middle of the lawn. His little hands were raised high and he was laughing so hard that Elizabeth had to hold back tears. The person responsible for this scene was the new gardener, a young man wearing a green uniform and cap who was pushing the wheelbarrow with gentle movements. The man was smiling too, and there was something about how he interacted with Noah that seemed natural, spontaneous. "He's never done this before," Elizabeth murmured to herself, her voice choked. It was the gardener's 3rd day of work. Until then, he had only taken care of the plants, trimmed the rose bushes near the main gate, cleaned the pool leaves. Elizabeth had briefly observed him through the window on previous days, noting only that he was dedicated to his work. She never imagined there would be any kind of connection with Noah. Her son had been diagnosed with severe autism at age 2. Since then, Elizabeth's life had turned into an endless search for treatments, therapies, specialists. She had consulted the best doctors in New York City, hired occupational therapists, speech therapists, specialized psychologists. She tried everything, from traditional methods to alternative approaches recommended by other parents in support groups. Nothing seemed to truly reach Noah. The boy lived in his own world. He didn't respond when called by name, didn't look anyone in the eye, spent hours lining up his toy cars in perfect rows. When something disrupted his routine, he had meltdowns that lasted for hours. Screaming, crying, repetitive hand movements. Elizabeth learned to live according to her son's rigid schedules, his specific needs, his inexplicable fears. But there he was, laughing, really laughing, not that nervous laugh that sometimes came out of nowhere and frightened everyone around. It was a happy child's laugh, a boy playing. Elizabeth went down the stairs so fast she almost tripped on the last step. She crossed the entry hall, passed through the living room decorated with furniture she rarely saw, and pushed the glass door leading to the garden. The afternoon sun was strong, typical of Boston in September. "Noah," she called, without thinking. The gardener stopped immediately. Noah also became quiet, but didn't have the meltdown Elizabeth expected. The boy just looked at her with those light brown eyes, then looked back at the gardener, as if waiting for the game to continue. "Sorry, ma'am," said the young man, taking off his cap. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. It's just that the boy was watching me work and—" No, Elizabeth interrupted, discreetly wiping her tears. "You're not causing any trouble. I heard him laugh and had to see." The gardener carefully placed the wheelbarrow on the ground. Noah remained sitting there, gently rocking his body back and forth, one of his characteristic movements. "He likes movement," explained the young man. "I noticed he kept watching when I pushed the empty wheelbarrow, so I thought maybe he wanted to feel it too." "How did you know?" asked Elizabeth, approaching slowly. "My younger brother is like this too," he replied simply. "I learned that sometimes they can't ask for things the way we expect, but you can tell by their gaze, by small gestures." Elizabeth felt something shift in her chest. For 3 years, she had hired highly qualified professionals, people with degrees from the best universities, renowned specialists. But none of them had managed to make Noah laugh that way. And there was a gardener on his 3rd day of work, provoking a reaction she thought impossible. "What's your name?" she asked. "Tyler, ma'am. Tyler Bennett." "And how long have you been working with gardening, Tyler?" He hesitated for a moment, running his hand through his dark hair before putting his cap back on. "About 2 years. Before that I worked somewhere else, but, well, things changed." Elizabeth was about to ask more questions when she heard footsteps behind her. She recognized the sound of high heels hitting the marble floor. It was Barbara, her mother-in-law, who had lived in the mansion since Elizabeth's husband had passed away 4 years ago. "Elizabeth, I need to speak with you," said Barbara, with that voice that wouldn't accept delay. "Not now, Barbara. It's urgent," insisted the mother-in-law, casting a suspicious look toward Tyler. "About a private matter." Elizabeth sighed. She knew that tone. Barbara wouldn't give up. She looked at Noah, who remained in his stroller, quiet but apparently calm. "Tyler, can you stay with him for a few more minutes, just while I sort something out?" "Of course, ma'am. No problem." Barbara pulled her daughter-in-law by the arm as soon as they entered the house. They crossed the spacious kitchen, passed through the pantry, and only stopped when they reached the laundry room, far from curious ears. "What do you think you're doing?" asked Barbara, her blue eyes shining with indignation. "What are you talking about?" "That man, the gardener. You left him alone with Noah." "Barbara, I was watching through the window. They were just playing." "Playing?" The mother-in-law crossed her arms. "You know nothing about this man. You don't know where he came from, what he did before, what his intentions are." "He was recommended by the employment agency I always use," Elizabeth defended herself. "He has references, he passed a background check." "That doesn't mean anything. Anyone can fake documents these days. And did you see how he was acting with the boy? Too familiar, too close. It's strange." "Strange?" Elizabeth felt anger rising. "What's strange is finally seeing my son happy." "Noah has specialized nannies. He has therapists. He doesn't need a gardener acting like a clown." "Those therapists he barely tolerates," Elizabeth retorted. "Barbara, you saw what I saw." Noah was laughing, really laughing. "When was the last time that happened?" Barbara pressed her lips together but didn't answer. The two women stared at each other in tense silence for a few seconds. "I'm just trying to protect my grandson," said Barbara, finally, her voice softer. "After everything this family has been through, after losing my son, I can't risk anything happening to Noah." Elizabeth felt her anger soften a bit. She knew her mother-in-law was serious. Barbara had lost her son, Elizabeth's husband, 4 years ago. The pain had never completely faded for either of them. But that didn't give the mother-in-law the right to control everything. "I understand your concern," said Elizabeth, choosing her words, "but Tyler was just playing with Noah. I'm not going to forbid my son from having a moment of happiness just because you're afraid." "It's not fear," replied Barbara, raising her chin. "It's prudence. I'm going to find out everything about this Tyler. If there's anything suspicious in his past, you'll have to let him go." Before Elizabeth could respond, Barbara left the laundry room, her heels echoing down the hallway. Elizabeth stood there, feeling the weight of another conflict. The mother-in-law had always been controlling, but since losing her son, that trait had intensified. Barbara had an opinion on everything, from the house's decor to how Elizabeth raised Noah. Living together was difficult, but Elizabeth had never had the courage to ask her mother-in-law to move out. After all, that house had also belonged to Barbara's husband, Elizabeth's father. When she returned to the garden, she came across a scene that made her stop again. Tyler was sitting on the grass, showing something to Noah. The boy was watching attentively, leaning forward, completely focused. Elizabeth approached slowly, trying not to make a sound. "See, Noah, this is an oak leaf," Tyler explained in a calm voice. "Feel how different it is. It has these points here, look." Noah didn't answer, but reached out and touched the leaf. His fingers traced the outline of the points, repeating the movement several times. Elizabeth recognized that gesture, that need for repetition that helped her son process sensations. "He likes textures," Elizabeth commented, and Tyler looked up. "Yes, I noticed. That's why I brought different leaves for him to feel." On the ground, around the two of them, several leaves were scattered. Large leaves, small ones, smooth, rough ones. Tyler had created a small natural display. "How do you know so much about this?" Elizabeth asked, sitting on the grass too, something she hadn't done in years. "I learned from my brother, like I said," Tyler replied. "He has cerebral palsy and is also autistic. I had to learn to communicate in different ways. And your parents?" Tyler lowered his gaze to the leaves, choosing his words. "My mother does what she can, but she works all day to support us. My father left when he found out about my brother. He couldn't handle the pressure, I think, so it fell to me to take care of Joey during the day." "How old are you, Tyler?" 24, ma'am." "And your brother?" 7 years old. He was born when I was 17. Elizabeth did the math in her head. Tyler was practically a boy when he became responsible for caring for a child with special needs. She imagined his life, divided between work, caring for his brother, maybe studies. She felt a pang of admiration mixed with sadness. "It must be difficult," she commented. "Sometimes," Tyler admitted with a small smile, "but Joey is the best brother I could have. He taught me a lot about patience, about noticing the small things we usually ignore." Noah had stopped touching the leaves and was now watching Tyler speak. He wasn't looking directly at his face, but kept his gaze in the direction of the gardener, which was already more than he usually did with anyone. "Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Did you study anything related to this?" Elizabeth asked. "Education? Occupational therapy?" Tyler hesitated again, and Elizabeth noticed he became uncomfortable when the topic was his education. "I started a special education course," he replied finally. "I did almost 2 years, but I had to stop. I couldn't afford the tuition and take care of Joey at the same time. I tried to manage both, but it became impossible." "Where did you work before coming here?" "At a private school, but not as a teacher. I was a general services assistant. I helped with maintenance, gardening, those things. It was a school that had some inclusion classes, so I ended up helping with the kids too." "And why did you leave there?" Tyler was quiet for a moment, watching Noah, who had gone back to lining up the leaves by size. "There was a problem with one of the students," he said in a low voice. "He was having a meltdown in the yard, hurting himself, hitting his head on the ground. The teachers didn't know how to calm him down. I intervened, used a technique that worked with my brother, and managed to help. But the principal didn't like it. Said I had overstepped my duties, that I wasn't qualified to handle situations like that." "She fired you for helping a child?" "Not exactly. She gave me a formal warning and said if it happened again, I would be fired. But after that, whenever I was near the inclusion classes, she would watch me, waiting for me to do something wrong. I couldn't handle the pressure and resigned." Elizabeth felt anger toward that principal she had never seen. How could someone punish a person for helping? But at the same time, she understood there were rules, hierarchies, legal responsibilities. The world didn't always reward good intentions. "And do you think you can resume your studies someday?" "I hope so. I'm saving money. But first I need to make sure Joey has everything he needs. His therapies are expensive, the medications too. My mother already does what she can." Noah started rocking his body again, a sign that he was getting tired or overstimulated. Elizabeth recognized the signs immediately. "I think I'd better take him inside," she said. "It's almost time for his therapy." "Of course." Tyler stood up, helping Elizabeth to her feet. "It was good playing with you, Noah." The boy didn't respond, but when Elizabeth picked him up, he didn't resist as he usually did. He stayed calm, resting his little head on his mother's shoulder, something rare. As she walked back to the house, Elizabeth thought about everything Tyler had told her. There was something genuine about that young man, something that transcended formal qualifications or professional experience. He had lived, had learned hands-on, had developed a sensitivity that the best courses didn't teach. But then she thought of Barbara's words. Her mother-in-law was right about one thing. Elizabeth really didn't know Tyler. She only had the agency's references and the conversation they had just had. Would that be enough? Should she investigate more about his past? Inside the house, she found Martha, Noah's specialized nanny, waiting in the living room. Martha was 52, had a nursing degree and specialized in caring for autistic children. She had been working with the family for 2 years and was extremely professional, but Elizabeth sensed there was no real emotional connection. It was a job for Martha, nothing more. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Wilson," greeted Martha with a polite smile. "Is Noah ready for therapy?" "I'll change him quickly and be right down," replied Elizabeth. In Noah's room, decorated with car and airplane themes the boy completely ignored, Elizabeth changed his clothes, putting on clean pants and a fresh shirt. Noah let himself be handled without resistance, staring at a spot on the wall. "You liked playing with Tyler, didn't you?" asked Elizabeth, knowing she wouldn't get an answer. "He seems like a good person." They went down together to the therapy room, a space Elizabeth had specially adapted for Noah's sessions. It had rubber flooring, walls painted in soft tones, shelves with therapeutic toys, a low table with small chairs. Sarah, the occupational therapist, was already waiting. "Hi, Noah," greeted Sarah with forced enthusiasm. "Are we going to play today?" Noah didn't look at her. He walked to the shelf and picked up his toy cars, starting to line them up on the floor. Sarah sighed, a nearly imperceptible sound, but one Elizabeth caught. She saw the tiredness in the therapist's eyes, the contained frustration. "Today he seems particularly distracted," commented Sarah, picking up her notepad. "Actually, he was doing very well earlier," replied Elizabeth. "He was playing in the garden." "Oh, great. I'll try to use that in the session then." Elizabeth left the room, letting Sarah work. She went up to her office but couldn't concentrate on the financial reports she needed to review. Her company, a chain of high-end home decor stores, required constant attention. But today her mind was elsewhere. She looked out the window and saw Tyler pruning the rose bushes near the gate. He worked with precise, careful movements. Every now and then she would pause to wipe the sweat from her forehead or to take a closer look at a plant before trimming it. There was dedication there, attention to detail. The phone rang, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was Jessica, her business partner and best friend for over 15 years. "Liz, did you see the numbers from the Westfield Mall store?" asked Jessica without any preamble. "I saw them this morning. What's up?" "Sales have been dropping for the third month in a row. We need to come up with a new strategy." Elizabeth pulled out the chair and sat down, forcing her mind to focus on work. "Schedule a meeting with the manager there. Let's analyze the customer profile, see what's changing." "I already did. It's tomorrow at 2. Can you make it?" "I'll be there." "And how's Noah?" Jessica always asked about Noah. She was one of the few people who genuinely cared, who didn't treat the boy's autism as a taboo or a tragedy. "Something different happened today," Elizabeth shared, noticing her voice was heavy with emotion. "He laughed, Jessica. He really laughed." "Really? That's wonderful. What happened?" "The new gardener. He was playing with Noah in the garden." "New gardener? You didn't tell me you hired someone." "I hired him last week. The previous one quit, said he got a better job in New York City. This new one, Tyler, started on Monday." "And he's already won Noah over like that?" "It seems so. Jessica, it was so beautiful to see. It's been 3 years since I've seen my son like that." "Then this Tyler must be special. Or I'm just too desperate to see any small progress as a miracle," Elizabeth said with a bitter laugh. "Hey, don't talk like that. You're the most dedicated mother I know. If you felt it was special, then it really was." They talked for a few more minutes about work, numbers, strategies. When she hung up, Elizabeth felt a bit more centered. Jessica had that power to balance her, to bring perspective when she was getting lost. The afternoon passed with video conference meetings, report reviews, and advertising campaign approvals. When Elizabeth went downstairs again, it was almost 6 in the evening. The therapy session had ended, and Noah was in the TV room with Martha, watching a children's show without much interest. "How was the session?" asked Elizabeth. "So-so," Martha replied honestly. "He didn't want to participate in the activities. He spent most of the time lining up the toy cars." "I see. Mrs. Wilson, with all due respect, maybe it's time to consider changing the therapeutic approach. We're not seeing much progress with the current techniques." It was the same conversation they'd been having for months. Each professional suggested something different, and Elizabeth no longer knew who to believe. "I'll think about it," she replied, the standard answer she gave when she didn't know what to do. After Martha left, Elizabeth prepared Noah's dinner. The boy would only eat specific things in a specific order: plain white rice, grilled chicken cut into perfect little cubes, cooked carrots. Any variation would cause a meltdown. Elizabeth had tried dozens of times to introduce new foods, always without success. As Noah ate mechanically, Elizabeth watched him. What thoughts were going through his little head? What did he feel when he laughed with Tyler? Could he process that happiness, or was it just a physical reaction without emotional meaning? Dinner passed in silence. Afterward, the bath routine, always following the same order. First wash the hair, then the body, always with the same sponge, the same soap. Exactly 3 minutes under the shower. Elizabeth timed it because if it went over, Noah would panic. She was just putting her son's pajamas on when she heard Barbara's voice in the hallway. "Elizabeth, I need to show you something." Her mother-in-law entered the room without asking, holding a large envelope. There was an expression of satisfaction on her face, the kind that indicated she had discovered something important. "What is this?" asked Elizabeth, finishing dressing Noah. "Information about your precious gardener." Elizabeth felt her stomach turn. Barbara had actually investigated Tyler. "Did you hire a detective?" "I made a few calls to the right people. It wasn't hard to find out." "Find out what, Barbara?" The mother-in-law opened the envelope and pulled out some printed sheets. She handed them to Elizabeth with a dramatic gesture. "Your Tyler Bennett was fired from the school where he worked. The official reason was inappropriate conduct with students. And you know what else? He never completed his special education degree. He dropped out in his second year without giving any explanations." Elizabeth took the papers. It was a copy of a human resources report from the school. She read the words, but tried to put them in the context of what Tyler had told her. He had mentioned the problem at the school, had admitted he dropped out of the program. He hadn't hidden anything. But the way it was written there, in formal and cold language, made it seem much worse. "He told me about this," said Elizabeth, returning the papers. "He told you?" Barbara seemed surprised. "And you still kept him here?" "He explained what happened. He tried to help a child in crisis and was reprimanded for it. He's not the monster you're trying to paint him as." "Elizabeth, for God's sake, open your eyes. This man was accused of acting outside his duties. Who's to say he won't do the same with Noah?" "Barbara, enough. I'm not going to discuss this now." Elizabeth finished putting Noah to bed, going through the nighttime ritual the boy needed. 3 specific stories, always the same ones, always in the same order. A kiss on the forehead, 2 pats on the pillow, door half open, hallway light on. When she left the room, Barbara was still there, waiting at the door. "You're making a mistake," said the mother-in-law. "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. And if something happens to Noah—" "Barbara, nothing will happen to Noah. Tyler was just playing with him in the garden." "For now," Barbara retorted. "But what if he starts wanting more? What if he realizes you're vulnerable, that you're desperate for anyone who shows interest in your son? Men like that know how to take advantage." "Men like that?" Elizabeth felt her anger explode. "You don't even know him. What are you judging him on? Class prejudice? Paranoia?" "Life experience," Barbara replied coldly. "I've learned that when something seems too good to be true, it usually is." The 2 women stared at each other in the quiet hallway. Elizabeth could hear her own heavy breathing, her heart pounding in her chest. "I'll keep monitoring the situation," Barbara said finally, "and if I notice anything suspicious, I'll take action." "What kind of action?" "Whatever's necessary." Barbara turned and went to her room in the other wing of the house. Elizabeth stood there, feeling the weight of that confrontation. She knew her mother-in-law wasn't bluffing. If Barbara decided Tyler was a threat, she would do everything to get him out of there. That night, Elizabeth took a long time to fall asleep. She tossed and turned in bed, thinking about Tyler, about Noah, about Barbara, about how life had become so complicated. Sometimes she missed the time when things were simple, when the biggest problem was choosing the color of the living room curtains. But that time had ended long ago. Since Noah was born, since her husband died in that stupid car accident, since she was left alone to deal with everything, she thought about Noah's laugh, that pure, genuine sound. Was it worth risking for that? Was it worth going against Barbara, against prudence, against common sense? Maybe yes. Maybe that was exactly what Noah needed. Not another hired therapist, not another qualified professional just doing their job, but someone who genuinely cared, who saw Noah not as a patient or a problem, but as a child. Elizabeth finally fell asleep around 3 in the morning with that thought echoing in her mind. The next day, she woke up more determined. She had the meeting at the mall in the afternoon, but in the morning she would stay home, observe Tyler working, understand better who he was. If she was going to defend that young man to Barbara, she needed to be sure she was making the right choice. She went down to have coffee and found Noah already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with Martha. The nanny was preparing his breakfast, always the same, always in the same order. toast without butter, pulp-free orange juice, 3 strawberries cut in half. "Good morning," greeted Elizabeth. "Good morning, Mrs. Wilson. Mr. Noah woke up early today." "Did he sleep well?" "From what Mrs. Barbara told me, yes. She passed by his room at 6 in the morning and he was still sleeping." Elizabeth drank her coffee, standing up, looking out the kitchen window. From there she couldn't see the front garden, only the back of the property. Tyler hadn't arrived yet. She had instructed him to come in the morning at 8, so there was still half an hour left. "Martha, can you stay with Noah a little longer? I need to take care of a few things." "Of course, no problem." Elizabeth went upstairs to get ready. She chose a casual but elegant outfit, light jeans and a linen blouse. She usually dressed more formally with suits and heels, but today she wanted to seem more approachable. When Tyler arrived, promptly at 8, Elizabeth was in the front garden, pretending to check the plants. In truth, she knew nothing about gardening, but she didn't want to seem like she was there specifically to talk to him. "Good morning, Mrs. Wilson," greeted Tyler, arriving with his backpack on his back. "Good morning, Tyler. Listen, can you do me a favor?" "Sure. What do you need?" "Explain a bit about how you take care of the plants. I want to understand better the work being done here." Tyler seemed surprised but smiled. "Absolutely. Where would you like to start?" They spent the morning together. Tyler explained about each type of plant, their specific needs, pruning, fertilizing, watering. He spoke with knowledge but simply, without using too many technical terms. Elizabeth noticed his passion for what he did. Around 10, Noah appeared at the door with Martha. The boy looked at the garden and started walking toward Tyler, completely ignoring the nanny. "Noah, wait!" called Martha, but Noah kept walking. Tyler crouched down when the boy came near. "Hi, Noah. Want to see what I'm doing?" Noah didn't answer but stood there watching. Tyler went back to work, carefully pruning a bush. Every now and then he explained what he was doing, even though he knew Noah wouldn't respond. "See? When the plant gets like this, with branches growing crooked, we need to cut them. It's not to hurt the plant, it's to help it grow better." Elizabeth watched everything a few meters away. Martha was by her side, also observing. "It's impressive," commented the nanny in a low voice. "I've never seen Noah so interested in anyone." "I know," replied Elizabeth. "Do you know this young man well?" "Not really. He's only been working here a few days." "Well, whoever he is, he has a special way with the boy." Noah stayed there for almost half an hour, just watching Tyler work. He didn't try to touch the tools, didn't have any meltdowns, didn't make repetitive movements. He was genuinely interested. When Tyler finished that part of the work, he picked up a hose to water the plants. Noah immediately backed away, his body tensing up. Elizabeth recognized that sign, the fear of water, one of the many inexplicable fears her son had. "It's okay, Noah," said Tyler, keeping his voice calm. "The water won't reach you. I'm just going to water the plants, look." He turned on the hose, but directed the spray away from where Noah was standing. The boy watched, still tense, but didn't run away as he usually did when he saw water. "Want to touch it?" asked Tyler, putting his finger in the spray and letting the water trickle down. To everyone's surprise, Noah took a step forward, then another. He reached out his hand, hesitant, and touched the water running from Tyler's hand. He pulled back quickly, but then returned and touched it again. Elizabeth had to bite her lip to keep from crying. It seemed small, insignificant perhaps to someone who didn't know Noah, but to her it was immense. Her son had always been afraid of water. Baths were daily battles, rain caused meltdowns, and there he was, voluntarily touching water. Martha had also noticed the importance of that moment. "Incredible," she murmured. Tyler continued letting Noah explore the sensation of the water without forcing anything, without pressure. When the boy grew tired, he moved away and went back to just watching. The morning passed quickly. Elizabeth lost track of time there in the garden, watching the interaction between Tyler and Noah. When she looked at her watch, it was past noon. "Martha, can you take Noah inside? It's time for his lunch." "Yes, ma'am." Noah resisted a little when Martha tried to take him, but eventually gave in. He looked at Tyler one last time before entering the house. "He likes you," said Elizabeth, when they were alone. It's mutual, replied Tyler, putting away the tools. He's a special boy. Tyler, can I ask you a personal question? Of course. Why didn't you tell me about the problem at the school from the beginning? When I interviewed you for the job, you only said you had resigned. Tyler stopped what he was doing. He looked down at his dirt-stained hands. Because I knew how it would sound, he answered honestly. I knew it would seem like I had done something wrong. People hear inappropriate conduct and immediately think the worst. I thought if I told the full story later, when you had already seen my work, you might believe me. And you think I wouldn't have believed you if you had told me before? I don't know, you probably wouldn't have hired me. Would you have taken the risk? Elizabeth thought about it. Would she be honest with him? She probably wouldn't have hired him. When you have a vulnerable child, the tendency is to avoid any risk. My mother-in-law found out about your past, she said, deciding to be direct. She's pressuring me to fire you. Tyler didn't seem surprised. And are you going to fire me? I haven't decided yet, admitted Elizabeth, but I need to know the full truth. Everything that happened at that school. Tyler sighed, taking off his gardening gloves. He sat on the stone bench near the fountain. The boy's name was Ethan. He was 7 years old and had severe autism, more severe than Noah's. He was having a meltdown during recess, hurting himself badly. I was pruning the nearby trees and saw it. The teachers were trying to restrain him, but they couldn't. He was banging his head hard on the ground, screaming, scratching himself. I dropped my tools and ran to help. And what did you do? I used a restraint technique I learned from my brother. It's something his therapist taught him. You wrap the child with your body, but not with force. It's a firm hug that gives a feeling of safety, of a boundary. It works because they need that deep pressure to calm down. I stayed there with him, whispering calming things, until he stopped struggling. And that worked? Yes. After about 5 minutes, he calmed down completely. But the principal showed up right at that moment. She saw a maintenance worker holding a student and was furious. She said I wasn't authorized to touch the children, that it could be considered assault, that the school could be sued. But you were helping. I know. The teachers explained it to her, confirmed that Ethan was hurting himself. But the principal wouldn't listen, said there were protocols, that I should have called the nurse or the special education coordinator. But there was no time. The boy would have seriously hurt himself if I hadn't done anything. And after that it became a nightmare. The principal put that in my file as a formal warning for inappropriate conduct. She didn't specify that I was helping, just that I had touched a student without authorization. Anyone reading that file would think the worst. Elizabeth understood. The world was full of misunderstandings like that, situations that seemed one thing when they were actually completely different. And your co-workers, the teachers, didn't they defend you? Some tried, but the principal had the final say, and I realized she was watching me all the time after that. It was uncomfortable, you know. Felt like any move I made would be interpreted in the worst way. So I resigned, thought it was better to leave on my own than wait for her to fire me. And the teaching degree? Why did you really drop out? I couldn't afford to pay and work at the same time. I tried to get a scholarship, but it didn't work out. My mom doesn't earn much, and the money I made had to go to Joey's therapies. I chose him. The story made sense. It was sad, unfair, but it made sense. Elizabeth believed Tyler, believed he had been a victim of a system that was too rigid, of a principal who followed rules instead of using common sense. Tyler, I'll be honest with you, said Elizabeth. My mother-in-law won't stop investigating you, trying to find reasons for me to fire you. If you keep working here, especially if you keep interacting with Noah, it's going to get difficult. I understand, replied Tyler, his voice low. Do you want me to stop talking to him? No. Elizabeth surprised herself with her own vehemence. That's not it. It's just, I need to be absolutely sure. I can't risk my son. Do you understand that? I understand perfectly. If I were you, I'd be careful too. So give me a week, I'll observe you with him. I'll do my own investigations. And if at the end of this week I think I can trust you, I'll ignore everything my mother-in-law says. Tyler nodded. That's fair. They stayed silent for a moment, listening to the sound of the water in the fountain, the birds singing in the trees. "Thank you for giving me this chance," said Tyler finally. "Thank you for being honest with me." Elizabeth went back inside the house, but her mind couldn't let go of that conversation. There was something about Tyler that touched her, not in a romantic way, but in a human way. He was struggling just like her, trying to do the best with the cards life had dealt. In the afternoon, she went to the meeting at the mall. Jessica was already waiting in the store management office, along with Pamela, the manager. They spent 2 hours analyzing numbers, discussing strategies, planning changes to the store layout. But even there, with her head trying to focus on work, Elizabeth thought about Noah, about Tyler, about everything that was happening at home. "Liz, are you listening to me?" asked Jessica at one point. "What?" "Sorry, I was thinking about something else. I noticed. Want to talk?" "Later. Let's finish here first." The meeting only ended close to 5. When they left the store, Jessica insisted on having coffee before heading home. "Okay, spill it," said Jessica, as soon as they sat down at a coffee shop inside the mall. "What's eating you?" Elizabeth told her everything. About Tyler, about Noah's reaction, about Barbara's investigations, about the conflict that was brewing. "And what do you want to do?" asked Jessica when she finished. "I don't know. I want Noah to be happy. I want him to have a chance to develop. But I'm also afraid of being naive, of risking my son because of a selfish desire to see him get better." "It's not selfish to want what's best for your son, Liz. But what if I'm seeing things that don't exist? What if Tyler is just a nice guy doing his job, and I'm projecting some miraculous hope onto him? Or maybe he's exactly what he seems to be, a good guy who has a gift with special children." Barbara won't let this go. She'll make it impossible. Barbara is traumatized by the loss of her son. She projects that trauma onto everything related to Noah. You know that. Elizabeth knew. Barbara had been a relatively calm mother-in-law before the accident, but after losing her son, she became obsessed with protecting her grandson, with preventing any possible future tragedy. "She makes me question everything," admitted Elizabeth. "Every decision I make, she finds a way to make it seem wrong. Then stop giving her so much power. It's your house, your son, your life." "But it was also her house, her son. I can't just kick her out." "I'm not saying to kick her out. I'm saying to set boundaries. Barbara needs to understand that the decisions about Noah are yours, not hers." They talked a bit more, but Elizabeth left there not feeling much better. The problem with Barbara was old, bigger than the issue with Tyler. It was about control, about grief, about 2 women trying to deal with impossible losses. When she got home, it was already dark. Noah was in the TV room with Martha, as always. There was no sign of Barbara. "Where is Mrs. Barbara?" asked Elizabeth. "She left around 3, ma'am, said she had some business to take care of in the city." Elizabeth felt a tightness in her chest. What business? Could it be something related to Tyler? Would Barbara be capable of going to his old school, talking to the principal, trying to get more compromising information? Yes, she would be capable. Elizabeth knew her mother-in-law well enough to know that. She spent another restless night. Barbara only returned around 9, coming in quietly through the side door. She didn't speak to Elizabeth, going straight to her room. This silence was worse than an argument. It meant Barbara was planning something. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. The following days were tense. Tyler continued working in the garden, and Noah kept seeking him out whenever he could. Elizabeth watched, mentally noting every interaction. She saw Tyler's patience, the gentle way he treated the boy, how he never forced anything, always letting Noah come to him in his own time. On Thursday, something changed. Elizabeth was in the office when she heard the sound of tires in the driveway. She looked out the window and saw an unfamiliar car. A man in a suit got out, looked around, and then rang the doorbell. She went down to answer. When she opened the door, the man introduced himself. "Good afternoon, my name is Robert Williams, I'm a lawyer. I'm looking for Mrs. Barbara Wilson. She's not here at the moment, can I help you?" Actually, I came to deliver some documents to her. It's about a private investigation she requested. Elizabeth's stomach turned. What kind of investigation? The lawyer hesitated, realizing he might have said too much. I'm sorry, I can't give details. These are confidential matters between me and my client. I'm her daughter-in-law. We live together. You can tell me. With all due respect, ma'am, but I can't. I need to speak directly with Mrs. Barbara. She'll be back in an hour. You can wait in the living room if you'd like. The lawyer accepted. Elizabeth led him to the living room and offered coffee, which he declined. He sat there with a thick folder on his lap, occasionally glancing at his watch. Elizabeth returned to the office but couldn't concentrate. What was Barbara planning now? A lawyer meant things were getting serious. Barbara arrived exactly 1 hour later, as if she had calculated it. Elizabeth heard muffled voices in the living room, but couldn't make out what they were saying. The conversation lasted about 20 minutes. When the lawyer left, Barbara went straight up to Elizabeth's office. "We need to talk," she said bluntly. "About what?" "About Tyler Bennett and Noah's future." Barbara closed the door behind her and sat in the chair across from Elizabeth's desk. She placed the folder the lawyer had brought on the table. "I got detailed information about his past," Barbara began, "and it's not pretty. Barbara, we've already talked about this. I know what happened at the school." "Do you? Do you really? Because what I found goes beyond that school." Elizabeth felt her heart race. "What do you mean?" Barbara opened the folder and started pulling out documents. "Tyler Bennett has a history of unstable jobs. In the last 5 years, he's worked at least 7 different places. He never stayed more than a year at each. That doesn't prove anything. Many people change jobs frequently. At all these places, he worked with children in some way. Schools, daycares, therapeutic centers, and at all of them, he left for some problematic reason." "What reasons?" "At one daycare, he was accused of not following safety protocols. At another school, he had disagreements with the administration about teaching methods. At a therapeutic center, he was fired for insubordination." Elizabeth picked up the documents and started reading. They were formal reports, termination letters, negative evaluations. But the more she read, the more she noticed a pattern. Tyler wasn't fired for doing something wrong to the children. He was fired for not following orders, for questioning authorities, for doing things his way. "Don't you see?" insisted Barbara. "This man is problematic. He can't keep a job, doesn't follow rules, thinks he knows more than everyone else. Or maybe he genuinely cares about the children and won't work in places that don't prioritize their well-being," Elizabeth countered. "You're being naive. You're so desperate to see progress in Noah that you're ignoring the obvious signs." "Obvious signs of what?" Elizabeth felt anger rising. "Signs that he's a dedicated person, that he has principles, that he won't sell out for a stable job if it means compromising what he believes in? Signs that he's unstable, that he's unreliable." The two women stared at each other across the desk. The tension in the air was palpable. "I hired another lawyer," Barbara said finally, "specialized in family law." Elizabeth felt her blood run cold. "Why?" "To advise me on my rights as a grandmother, on what I can do if I think my grandson is at risk." "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. If you don't take the necessary steps to protect Noah, I will." "Barbara, are you threatening to sue for custody of my son?" "I'm saying I'll do whatever it takes. You're not thinking clearly. You're letting a stranger get close to a vulnerable child based on what? On a week of work, on a few laughs? That's not enough." Elizabeth stood up, trembling with anger. "Get out of my office. Elizabeth, get out, now!" Barbara picked up the folder and left, slamming the door. Elizabeth sank into her chair, her legs feeling weak. She couldn't believe what was happening. Was Barbara really considering fighting for custody of Noah? She needed air. She went downstairs and out into the garden. It was almost 5 in the afternoon, and Tyler was finishing up the day's work, putting away the tools in the small shed that served as storage. "Tyler," she called, and her voice came out weaker than she intended. He turned around and immediately noticed something was wrong. "Did something happen?" "I need to tell you something. My mother-in-law, she's planning to sue me for custody of my son. Because of you." Tyler turned pale. What? She hired a lawyer. She's gathering evidence that I'm not making proper decisions regarding Noah, and you're part of that evidence. I didn't know I'd cause so much trouble, said Tyler, visibly shaken. Mrs. Wilson, if you want me to leave. No. Elizabeth surprised herself again. I don't want you to leave. I want you to stay. But I need to know if I can really trust you. I need the whole truth, Tyler. About all those jobs you lost, about everything. Tyler ran his hand over his face, tired. I'll tell you everything, but it'll take a while. I have time. They sat on the stone benches near the fountain, and Tyler began to speak. He talked about his first job, right after his brother was born. He was an assistant at a daycare, only 17 years old. He was learning, trying to do his best. But one day, he saw one of the caregivers being negligent with a baby. She left the child crying alone for hours, ignored signs that she was sick. Tyler reported it to the director. He was fired a week later, accused of causing trouble among the staff. At his second job at a private school, he noticed that the teachers treated the special education children like a burden, like a problem. They did the bare minimum, with no real dedication. Tyler started spending more time with these children, helping voluntarily outside his hours. The coordination said he was overstepping his duties. He was fired. The story repeated itself in every place. Tyler saw something wrong, tried to change it, ended up clashing with the administration. It was never about the children finding him problematic. It was about the adults. I know it seems like I'm the problem, said Tyler. And maybe I am. Maybe I don't know how to function within the rules, but I can't see a child being neglected and do nothing. I just can't. Elizabeth listened to everything in silence. When he finished, she processed the story. She saw two sides there. On one hand, Tyler clearly had problems with authority, with following protocols. On the other, his intentions seemed genuinely good. And your brother? She asked. Joey, how is he now? He's okay, all things considered. He goes to therapy twice a week. He can't speak, but he communicates through gestures, through sounds. He's a happy boy, you know. Even with all the limitations, he smiles every day. Are you close? Very. He's my reason to keep trying. When I look at him, I understand that every special child has a whole universe inside them. They just need someone willing to explore that universe with them. Elizabeth felt her eyes well up. Those words touched something deep in her. Tyler, I'm going to make you a proposal, she said, deciding to take a risk. I'll keep you here, not as a gardener, but as Noah's assistant. I'll pay a better salary, and your job will be to spend time with him, help him develop. But I don't have a complete education. I'm not a certified therapist. You don't need to be. You have something worth more than any certificate. You have real experience, genuine empathy, patience. That's what Noah needs. And your mother-in-law? I'll deal with her. It won't be easy, but I'll find a way. Tyler was silent for a long moment, processing the proposal. Mrs. Wilson, I accept, but on one condition. What? If at any point you feel it's not working, that I'm not helping Noah the way I should, tell me. I won't fight. I won't make a scene. I'll leave without hard feelings. Agreed. They shook hands, sealing the agreement. Elizabeth felt a mix of fear and hope. She was going against everything that was sensible, against all the advice she would receive. But something inside her said that was the right choice. That evening, during dinner, Elizabeth announced the decision to Barbara. Her mother-in-law was sitting at the table, eating in silence, when Elizabeth spoke. Tyler will no longer work as a gardener. I'm hiring him as Noah's assistant. Barbara dropped her fork forcefully, making a loud noise against the plate. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. After everything I showed you, after all the evidence, I saw the evidence, and I saw that it's evidence of a man who cares too much, not too little. You're making the biggest mistake of your life. Maybe, but it's my life and it's my son. The decision is mine. Then you leave me no choice, said Barbara, rising from the table. I will proceed with the legal action. Do what you think you must do. I won't change my mind. Barbara left the room, and Elizabeth sat there, alone, trembling. She had just declared war on her own mother-in-law. There was no turning back now. In the following days, the house was divided into silent battlefields. Barbara barely spoke to Elizabeth, communicating only through cold notes left in the kitchen. The lawyer returned 2 more times, always bringing documents, always talking in a low voice with Barbara in the living room. But meanwhile, something beautiful was happening. Tyler began working officially with Noah. They spent hours together in the garden, exploring plants, playing in the dirt, observing insects. Noah began showing interest in things he had never shown before. He looked at the sky when a bird passed by. He touched flowers with curiosity. He laughed more. Elizabeth documented everything. She made discreet videos, noted every small progress. She knew she might need this evidence if Barbara really took the case to court. Martha, the nanny, also noticed the changes. "I've never seen the boy like this," she commented one afternoon. "He's more present, more connected." "I know," replied Elizabeth. "It's as if Tyler found the right frequency to reach him. Have you thought about hiring more professionals who work with his approach? I don't know if there's a specific approach of his. I think it's more about genuine human connection." The following week, Elizabeth received a formal notification. Barbara had indeed filed for shared custody of Noah, alleging that the mother was making inappropriate decisions regarding the child's care. The document was cold, technical, full of legal terms. But the message was clear. Barbara was willing to go all the way. Elizabeth hired her own lawyer, Dr. Richard Peterson, a middle-aged man known for being aggressive in court. In the first meeting, he was direct. "The situation is not simple," said Dr. Richard. "Your mother-in-law has arguments. She could claim that you hired someone without proper qualifications to care for a vulnerable child. That could be seen as negligence. But Tyler is doing good for Noah. You need to see the progress. I believe you, but a judge will want to see concrete evidence, medical reports, therapist evaluations, things like that. Do you have that?" "I can get it." "Then get it, and quickly. The preliminary hearing is in 3 weeks." Elizabeth left that office feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. She needed to prove that Tyler was helping Noah, that she wasn't putting her son at risk. But how? She thought of Sarah, the occupational therapist. Maybe she could do an official evaluation of Noah, document the progress. She scheduled an urgent meeting. "I need you to make a complete report on Noah's development," Elizabeth requested as soon as they sat down. "I can do that," replied Sarah, "but I need to understand the context. Why the urgency?" Elizabeth explained the situation, leaving out only the most personal details of the conflict with Barbara. "I understand," said Sarah when she finished. "Well, I need to be honest with you. In our sessions, Noah hasn't shown much progress. He remains resistant to traditional therapeutic activities." Elizabeth's heart sank. "But you saw him with Tyler. You saw how he responds." "I did, yes. And it's impressive. But that's not traditional occupational therapy. It's spontaneous social interaction. I don't know how that fits in terms of formal therapeutic progress." "So you can't help?" "I can write the report, but I can't invent progress that isn't happening in the official sessions. It would be unethical." Elizabeth returned home discouraged. That meant, officially, Noah wasn't improving. All the progress she saw happened outside formal therapy sessions, in undocumented, unmeasurable moments. She discussed this with Jessica on the phone that evening. "You need another opinion," advised Jessica. "Look for other specialists, someone who works with less traditional approaches." "How am I going to find that in 3 weeks?" "Research, Liz. Call autism parent associations, look for support groups, ask for referrals. There has to be someone who understands what's happening with Noah." Elizabeth spent the night researching. She found articles about different therapeutic approaches for autism, approaches based on nature, on free play, on emotional connections. She discovered that there were indeed professionals who worked outside the traditional box. The next day, she started making calls. She spoke with 3 specialized psychologists, 2 occupational therapists with alternative approaches, and an educator who worked with outdoor education. She scheduled evaluation appointments with everyone who was available. The first was with Dr. Margaret Wilson, a 62-year-old psychologist who had worked with autistic children for decades. She arrived at the mansion on a Friday morning, carrying an old but well-maintained briefcase. "So you're Noah," she said, crouching to the boy's height. Noah didn't look at her, but he didn't run away either. Dr. Margaret smiled. "May I observe him in his natural environment?" she asked Elizabeth. "I want to see how he acts without direct adult intervention." "Of course. Tyler is with him in the garden now." The three went out to the garden. Tyler was showing Noah how to plant seeds in small pots. The boy watched attentively, his hands touching the soil with curiosity. Dr. Margaret stood there, just observing, for almost an hour. Occasionally she made notes in a small notebook. She didn't try to interact with Noah, didn't ask Tyler questions. She just observed. Afterwards, she sat with Elizabeth in the living room. "What's happening there is fascinating," she said. "Is it? Do you see progress?" "I see connection. I see a child learning to trust another human being. And that, Elizabeth, is the foundation of everything. Without connection, without trust, no progress is possible." But the other therapist couldn't create that connection because they were focused on technique, not the child. Understand, I'm not saying traditional therapies don't work. They work for many children. But some children, like Noah, need something different first. They need an emotional bridge. And Tyler is that bridge. Apparently, yes. He's not trying to fix Noah. He's just existing with him in the present moment. That is powerful. "Can you put that in an official report?" "I can and I will. I'll detail what I observed, explain the theory behind it, back it up with recent studies on autism and emotional connections. It will be a solid report." Elizabeth felt a wave of relief. "Thank you. You don't know how much this means." Dr. Margaret took her hand. "You're a good mother, Elizabeth. You're doing the right thing by trusting your instinct. The answer isn't always in the protocols. Sometimes it's in the heart." In the following days, other professionals came to evaluate Noah. Not everyone agreed with Tyler's approach, but most saw the progress, saw the connection, saw something special happening. Elizabeth began gathering the reports, preparing her defense. But then something unexpected happened. Barbara appeared in Elizabeth's office on a Monday afternoon. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice low. "Of course." Barbara sat down, but not with her usual rigid posture. She was hunched over, vulnerable. "I saw the video," she said. "What video?" "Of Noah laughing. You didn't know I had access to the garden camera. I installed it when Noah was born, so I could watch him even when I was in my room. I never told you because, well, I thought you'd find it too controlling." Elizabeth didn't know what to say. "I've been watching them," Barbara continued. "Tyler and Noah, every day. And today, I saw something that broke my heart." "What did you see?" Noah looked at Tyler and said a word. One word, Elizabeth. He said, "Ty." Elizabeth felt tears come to her eyes. Noah had spoken. He had actually said a meaningful word. "I missed that," she said, her voice choked. "I recorded it. You can watch it later, but, Elizabeth, I need to apologize." "Barbara, no, let me speak. I was wrong. I was so obsessed with protecting Noah that I wasn't seeing what he really needed. I was projecting my fear, my trauma onto the situation. When I lost my son, when I lost Noah's father, something in me broke. I became so afraid of losing anyone else that I started seeing danger in everything." Elizabeth stood up and hugged her mother-in-law. Barbara let herself be hugged, crying on her daughter-in-law's shoulder. "I'm so sorry," Barbara sobbed. "I'm sorry for everything. For doubting you, for wanting to take Noah away, for not trusting your judgment. You were scared, I understand, but I was wrong. Tyler he's special. He's exactly what Noah needed, and I almost ruined it because of my selfish fear." They stood there hugging for a long moment, finally united after so much conflict. "I'll drop the lawsuit," Barbara said when they separated. "I'll call the lawyer later today." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. In fact, I want to do more than that. I want to support you, support Tyler, support Noah. I want to be part of the solution, not the problem. Thank you, Barbara. No, thank you. For not giving up, for trusting your instinct, for fighting for our boy even when I was against you. That night, the house had a different atmosphere. Barbara had dinner with Elizabeth, and they talked openly. Perhaps for the first time since they started living together, they talked about the past, about the son Barbara had lost, about the scars that never fully healed. You know what hurts me the most, Barbara confessed. It's that I couldn't help my son when he needed it. He was going through problems I didn't know about. He was suffering in ways he never told me. And then he was gone, and I never had the chance to do things differently. You couldn't have known, Barbara. But I should have noticed. I should have been more present, more attentive. And with Noah, I think I tried to make up for that. I tried to be so present that I ended up suffocating him. We can start over, Elizabeth suggested. Together we can help Noah the right way. Not out of fear, but out of love. I'd really like that. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. In the following months, the household dynamics changed completely. Barbara became actively involved in Noah's development. She began attending sessions with Tyler, learning his techniques, understanding the philosophy behind them. She started interacting with Noah differently, more patiently, more present. Tyler continued working with Noah, but now with the family's full support. Elizabeth increased his salary as promised and also began funding his studies. Tyler resumed his special education course, now taking online classes during the evenings. Noah continued progressing, slowly, in small steps, but progressing. He began speaking isolated words. Mom, Barbara, Ty, flower, water. Each word was a victory celebrated by the entire family. One day, Tyler brought his brother Joey to meet Noah. Elizabeth was nervous at first, unsure how Noah would react to another child, especially one with special needs too. But to her surprise, the two connected immediately. Joey didn't speak but communicated through sounds and gestures. Noah observed that different form of communication and seemed to understand. The two began playing together, each at their own pace but together. It was beautiful to see. They speak the same language, Tyler commented, watching. Even without words, they understand each other. Maybe that's what we all need, said Elizabeth, to find people who speak our language, even when it's not made of words. The friendship between Noah and Joey became regular. Tyler started bringing his brother twice a week, and the children spent hours together in the garden. Barbara also grew fond of Joey, starting to treat him like another grandson. It was she who suggested the idea that would change everything. Elizabeth, I was thinking, said Barbara one afternoon while they had tea in the garden. We have this huge house, all this space, and there are so many families out there struggling alone, like you were struggling, like Tyler's mother is struggling. What are you suggesting? What if we created a space here, a place where special children could come a few times a week, play together, learn together? It wouldn't be a formal school nor a clinic, it would be a connection space. Elizabeth thought about it. The idea was bold, but it made sense. Do you think it would work? I think it's worth trying. We have the resources, we have the space, we have Tyler who could coordinate. We have you, with your experience managing businesses, and we have me who finally found a purpose again. It's a beautiful idea, Barbara. So, shall we do it? Let's do it. It took 3 months to put the plan into practice. They adapted the mansion's annex, which was used as storage, turning it into a welcoming therapeutic space. They installed rubber floors, painted the walls with soft colors, set up shelves with toys and various materials. In the garden, they created specific areas for different activities: a sensory garden, a space with sand and water, an area with swings and movement equipment. Tyler was crucial in the planning. He used all his knowledge accumulated over years of experience to create a truly adapted environment. Elizabeth handled the legal and administrative part, ensuring everything complied with regulations. Barbara took charge of reaching out to families who could benefit. The connection space opened in March the following year. On the first day, they welcomed 5 children besides Noah and Joey. All had some form of autism or special need. The parents were nervous, hopeful, scared. Tyler welcomed them calmly. "There's no pressure here," he explained. "There's no rigid schedule, no goals to meet. We just want to create an environment where your children can be themselves, where they can connect with each other, where they can grow at their own pace." And that's exactly what happened. The children explored the space, each in their own time. Some stayed quiet for hours, just observing. Others went straight to the garden, touching the plants. One girl spent the whole day playing with water, fascinated by its liquid texture. The parents watched, many with tears in their eyes. It wasn't common to see their children so calm in new environments, so open to exploring. "It's different from other places," commented one mother, Stephanie, whose son Ethan was 6 years old and had severe autism. "Other places always want them to behave a certain way, learn certain things. Here it seems like they can just exist." "That's exactly the idea," replied Elizabeth. In the following weeks, Connection Space began to gain a reputation. More families signed up, wanting to give their children that experience. Elizabeth and Barbara decided to keep the number limited to 12 children per session to ensure adequate attention for everyone. Tyler hired 2 assistants, people he had met in his various previous jobs. Grace was 28 and had a son with cerebral palsy. Ethan was 31 and had worked for years in special education before becoming disillusioned with the traditional system. Together, they formed a cohesive team united by the same philosophy. Noah thrived in that environment. Being surrounded by other children like him seemed to free him in some way. He began to mimic behaviors he saw in others, started to explore more, take more risks. The words he spoke gradually increased. Simple sentences began to emerge. One day, months after the opening, Noah was in the garden with Joey when Elizabeth passed by. The two were planting flowers in a flower bed. "Mom," called Noah, looking directly at her. Elizabeth stopped, her heart racing. It was the first time Noah had called her directly, looking into her eyes. "Hi, my love," she replied, trying to keep her voice calm despite the emotion. "Look," said Noah, pointing to the flower he had just planted. "Pretty." Elizabeth knelt beside him. "It's very pretty. Did you plant it?" Noah nodded. Then, to her surprise, he stretched out his arms. He wanted a hug. Elizabeth hugged him, feeling the tears flow freely. It was the first time in 5 years that Noah had asked for a hug spontaneously. Tyler watched from afar with a smile on his face. Barbara was also there, wiping her own tears. "It was worth it," said Barbara, approaching. "All the conflict, all the pain, it was worth it." "Yes," agreed Elizabeth, "it was very much worth it." Connection Space continued to grow. 6 months after the opening, there was a waiting list of 30 families. Elizabeth and Barbara decided to expand, hired more assistants, and increased the operating hours. Tyler finished his special education course with honors. His thesis was on education based on emotional connections for children with autism, using Connection Space as a case study. The committee was so impressed that they suggested he publish the work in academic journals. "I never thought I'd get here," confessed Tyler on graduation day. Elizabeth, Barbara, and Noah were there to celebrate with him. Joey was also there, in the arms of Tyler's mother, Mrs. Catherine, who had been invited. "You deserve all this and more," said Elizabeth. "You changed my son's life. You changed my life too." "It changed mine too," added Barbara. "It taught me that sometimes we need to break rules to do what's right." During the ceremony, when Tyler was called to receive his diploma, Noah did something unexpected. He stood up from his chair and shouted, "Ty!" The whole room turned to look. Tyler searched with his eyes and found Noah, standing and smiling. He waved to the boy, who waved back. It was a simple moment, but full of meaning. Noah was communicating, expressing happiness for someone else, connected to the world around him. After the graduation, there was a small party at the mansion. Friends of Tyler, families from the Connection Space, professionals who had supported the project. Jessica was also there, proud of her friend. "You did something incredible here, Liz," said Jessica, watching the children playing in the garden. "It wasn't just me. It was Tyler. It was Barbara. It was everyone who believed. But you were the one who had the courage to start, to go against what everyone said was right and follow what your heart told you." "I thought it would all go wrong," admitted Elizabeth. When Barbara filed that lawsuit, when everyone said I was being irresponsible, I almost gave up. But you didn't. And look at the result." Elizabeth looked around. Noah was playing with Joey and other children, all together, each in their own world but at the same time sharing the same space. Tyler was talking with the parents, explaining some technique. Barbara was helping Mrs. Catherine serve the appetizers, the two women who came from such different worlds but had found a common purpose. "You know what's most beautiful," said Elizabeth. "It's that this grew beyond Noah. It's helping so many other families. It's changing lives. And it will keep changing. I heard you're thinking about opening other spaces in nearby cities." "We are. Barbara is leading that project. She has so much energy now, so much purpose. It's as if she's been reborn." Indeed, Barbara was unrecognizable. The bitter and controlling woman had given way to someone full of life, hope, and generosity. She dedicated herself to the connection space with passion, always researching new techniques, always looking for ways to help more families. 1 year after the opening of the connection space, they held a special celebration. They invited all the families who had been there, all the professionals who had helped. It was a day of gratitude, of reflection on how far they had come. Tyler was invited to give a speech. He climbed onto the small stage they had set up in the garden, a little nervous. "When I came to work here as a gardener, almost 2 years ago, I just wanted a stable job," he began. "I was tired of being fired, of not being accepted, of being seen as problematic. But then I met Noah, and I met Mrs. Elizabeth, and I met Mrs. Barbara, and everything changed." He paused, emotional. "Noah taught me that connection doesn't need words. Mrs. Elizabeth taught me that trusting your instinct is more important than following rules. And Mrs. Barbara taught me that it's never too late to change, to grow, to forgive." He looked to where the 3 people were sitting. "You changed my life. You gave me not just a job, but a family. You gave me not just an opportunity, but a purpose. And now, together, we're changing other lives too. I have no words to describe what this means to me." The audience applauded. Many people were crying, touched by the sincerity of his words. Then it was Noah's turn. Elizabeth hadn't planned this, but Noah stood up and walked to the stage. Tyler extended his hand, helping the boy up. Noah stood there, looking at all those people. Before, a situation like this would have caused a severe crisis. Too many people, too much noise, too much stimulation. But now he remained calm. He looked at Tyler, who nodded encouragingly. "Thank you," said Noah, his voice clear. It was a simple word, but it was loaded with meaning. "Thank you for everything, for all the people who had helped in his development, for everyone who had believed in him." The audience erupted in applause. Elizabeth was crying openly, as was Barbara. It was a moment neither of them had imagined possible. Noah, standing on a stage, speaking to dozens of people, expressing gratitude. When he got off the stage, Noah walked straight to Elizabeth and hugged her. Then he hugged Barbara, and finally Tyler. "I love you," he said to Tyler, the words still a little shaky but clear. Tyler knelt down, coming to the boy's eye level. "I love you too, Noah, so much." It was the first time Noah had said those words to anyone besides his mother. It was the first time he had verbally expressed love. It was another barrier broken, another connection established. That night, after everyone had left, Elizabeth stayed in the garden watching the stars. Barbara joined her, bringing 2 cups of tea. "I'll never get tired of nights like this," said Barbara, sitting down next to her daughter-in-law. "Me neither. You know, sometimes I think about how everything could have been different if I had continued with that lawsuit. But you didn't continue. You chose to trust. You chose to change." "It was scary," Barbara admitted. "Admitting I was wrong, letting go of control, but it was the best decision I ever made." "It was scary for me, too," said Elizabeth. "Going against what everyone said was sensible, trusting a stranger with my son. But sometimes the best things in life require courage. They really do." They stayed there in comfortable silence, drinking tea, listening to the night sounds of the garden. Inside the house, Noah slept peacefully, finally at peace with the world around him. Tyler was in his small apartment, studying for a specialization that would start soon. Joey was with Mrs. Catherine, who now had the resources to give her son all the necessary treatments thanks to the salary Tyler earned. So many lives changed, so many connections established, all because a mother had the courage to follow her instinct, because a young man had the courage to keep trying despite all the rejections, because a grandmother had the courage to confront her own fears. The months kept passing. The connection space became a reference in the region. They started receiving visits from professionals from other cities wanting to learn about the methodology. Tyler gave workshops, shared knowledge, inspired others to think outside the traditional box. Noah continued to progress. At 6 years old, he was already speaking in full sentences, could express his feelings, and had friends. He was still autistic, still had his peculiarities, his challenges. But he was a happy, connected, loved child. The relationship between Elizabeth and Barbara grew stronger. They became true partners, not just in running the connection space, but in life. They supported each other, complemented each other, formed a solid team. Tyler brought a girlfriend to meet the family. Melissa was an occupational therapist. They had met at one of the workshops he taught. She also believed in unconventional approaches, also had experience with special needs children. She fit into the group perfectly. One day, almost 2 years after that first meeting in the garden, something special happened. It was Noah's birthday, his 7th. The party was at the connection space, with all the children who attended the place, all the families, all the professionals. Noah was in the center, surrounded by friends. Joey was by his side, the two inseparable as always. The children played, shouted, laughed. It was an organized mess, beautiful to see. When it was time for Happy Birthday, when everyone sang, Noah blew out the candles. Then, to everyone's surprise, he asked to speak himself. "I want to say thank you," he began, his voice a little shy but firm. "Thank you, Mom, for never giving up on me. Thank you, Grandma Barbara, for loving me so much. Thank you, Tyler, for teaching me that it's okay to be different. Thank you, Joey, for being my best friend." He paused, looking around. "And thank you to all of you for making this place exist. Here I can be myself. Here I am happy." There wasn't a dry eye at the party. Those simple words, coming from a child who years ago could barely make eye contact, were powerful. They were a testament to transformation, to love, to possibilities. After the party, when everyone had left, the family stayed together in the garden. Elizabeth, Barbara, Noah, Tyler, Melissa, Mrs. Catherine, and Joey. They weren't all related by blood, but they were family, united by something stronger than genetics, by choice, by love, by shared experiences. "You know what I was thinking," said Elizabeth. "None of us could have imagined 2 years ago that we'd be here today." "I certainly couldn't," agreed Barbara. "I was so lost in my fear, in my pain. I thought protecting Noah meant controlling him, shielding him from everything and everyone. And I thought I'd never find a place where I could truly make a difference," added Tyler. I was starting to lose hope. "But you found each other," said Melissa, who, although new to the group, already understood the depth of that story. "And together, you created something incredible." "We really did," confirmed Elizabeth, "and we're not stopping here." Indeed, they had plans. They were already negotiating to open a second connection space in Boston, and afterward, they wanted to expand to other cities. They were also developing a training program for professionals, teaching the philosophy and techniques they used. The dream was that eventually there would be connection spaces all across the country, places where special children could be themselves, where families could find support, where professionals could work with passion instead of just following protocols. "It's going to be a lot of work," said Barbara. "A lot of work." "But it's worth it," replied Elizabeth. "It's always worth it," agreed Tyler, looking at Noah, who was playing with Joey on the grass. "When it's for love, it's always worth it." And so, in that garden illuminated by the stars, surrounded by the people they loved, they toasted to the future. A future they had built together, with courage, with faith, with love. A future that would be shared with hundreds, perhaps thousands of families yet to come. The journey had begun with a boy who didn't speak and a gardener who didn't give up. Now it was a movement, a mission, a social transformation. It proved that sometimes the biggest changes start small, with a simple gesture, an unexpected connection, the courage to trust. Noah grew up. At 10 years old, he was a completely different child from that silent boy in the garden. He was still autistic, he always would be, but he had learned to navigate the world, to communicate, to form bonds. He attended an inclusive school, had neurotypical and neurodivergent friends, had hobbies. Joey also thrived. The constant therapies, the welcoming environment of the connection space, the friendship with Noah, everything contributed. He learned to use an alternative communication device and could express complex thoughts through it. Tyler and Melissa got married in a simple ceremony in the mansion's garden. Noah was the ring bearer, carefully carrying the rings. It was a day of joy, celebration, and union. Elizabeth and Barbara cried, of course. It was already a tradition for them to cry at important moments. The connection space expanded to 12 cities. Each unit maintained the same philosophy, the same approach based on connection and love. They trained dozens of professionals, impacted hundreds of families. Elizabeth wrote a book about the journey. When the Gardener Planted Hope became a bestseller, touching thousands of parents who saw themselves in its pages, who recognized the pain, the struggle, the eventual victory. Barbara became the spokesperson for a national movement for inclusive education. She used her experience, her personal transformation, to inspire others. She gave lectures, participated in debates, fought for better public policies. Years passed. Noah graduated from high school and entered university to study biology. He always loved plants, always loved the garden where it all began. He wanted to be a botanist. He wanted to study how plants communicate with each other, how they form invisible networks beneath the earth. "It's funny," he said to Tyler one day when he visited the original connection space. "You taught me that plants communicate without words. That's how I began to understand that I could communicate too, even when I didn't have the words." Tyler, now in his early 30s and the educational director of the Connection Spaces Network, smiled. "You always had a lot to say, Noah. You just needed to find your way of saying it. And you helped me find that way. It wasn't just me. It was your mother who had courage. It was your grandmother who knew how to change. It was you yourself who never gave up even when it was difficult." Noah looked around the garden. Almost everything was the same, but with a few additions. More trees, more flowers, more spaces for children to explore. But the essence was the same. "Sometimes I come here just to remember," Noah confessed. "To remember where I started, how hard it was. It helps me appreciate how far I've come." "And you'll go much further," said Tyler. "You have a bright future ahead." Joey was also present. Now 15, tall and strong, still nonverbal but communicative in his own way. He had become a volunteer assistant at the connection space, helping with the younger children. He had a special gift for understanding what they needed, even without words. Elizabeth arrived for the lunch they had scheduled. She brought Barbara along, the two always together now. Jessica was there too, still the best friend, still the wise counselor. "Just look at this place," said Jessica, observing. "Who would have thought that day at the mall when you told me about a gardener who made your son laugh would lead to all this?" "I couldn't have imagined," admitted Elizabeth. "I thought I was just trying to help Noah. I didn't know we would end up helping so many people." "It's the ripple effect," said Barbara. "One good deed leads to another, which leads to another. And soon you created an entire movement." They had lunch together in the garden, as they had done so many times over the years. They talked, laughed, reminisced about stories. They spoke about the challenges they still faced, the dreams they still had. "You know what I want?" said Melissa, now Tyler's wife and director of one of the connection spaces. "I want that one day inclusion is so natural that we no longer need special spaces, that regular schools, parks, libraries, all places are naturally welcoming to all children." "It's a beautiful dream," agreed Elizabeth, "and we're working towards that. Every child who leaves here more confident, more prepared, is a step in that direction." "Sometimes I wonder," said Barbara, "if my son would be proud of what we've done. If he would look at all this and approve." "He would be," said Elizabeth, taking her mother-in-law's hand. "I'm sure he would be." "I think so too," added Noah. "From what you've told me about him, he was a good person. He would have loved the connection space. Barbara smiled with tears in her eyes. It still hurt, the loss of her son, it always would, but now there was purpose, there was meaning. There was a way to honor his memory, to transform the pain into something constructive. In the evening, when everyone had left, Elizabeth was alone in the garden. She sat on the same bench where Tyler had sat years ago when he told his story. She looked at the trees he had planted, at the flowers he had cared for. She thought about how unpredictable life is, how one moment can change everything, how one courageous decision can create ripples that go far beyond what we imagine. She thought about all the what-ifs. What if she hadn't hired Tyler? What if she had fired him when Barbara pressured her? What if she had only followed the advice of traditional experts? What if she hadn't trusted her mother's instinct? Probably Noah would still be trapped in his silent world. Probably she would still be struggling alone, desperate, without hope. Probably Barbara would still be consumed by fear and the need for control. But she had trusted. She had taken a risk, and the risk was worth it. The sun was setting, tinting the sky orange and pink. It was beautiful, as it always was, but today Elizabeth paid more attention, appreciated it more, because she had learned from Noah and from Tyler the importance of being present, of noticing the details, of valuing every moment. "Thank you," she whispered to the universe, to fate, to whatever had conspired to bring Tyler to her garden that day. "Thank you for giving me courage. Thank you for giving me a second chance. Thank you for showing me that it's never too late to change, to grow, to believe in miracles." And there, in that garden where it all began, Elizabeth felt peace, a deep, complete peace. The peace of someone who fought and won, who loved and was loved, who turned pain into hope. The story of Noah and Tyler was a story of connection, of how two unlikely people met and changed each other's lives, of how this meeting created waves that reached hundreds, thousands of other people. It was a story about not giving up, about trusting the unlikely, about looking beyond appearances. It was about mothers who fight, about young people who persist, about grandmothers who learn to change. It was about special children who have entire worlds inside them, just waiting for someone willing to explore them. But above all, it was a story about love. Love that transforms, that heals, that enables. Love that doesn't give up, that doesn't judge, that isn't afraid. Love that is the most powerful force in the universe, capable of creating miracles when we least expect it. And so, as the sun set over the garden, a new family continued to grow. Not a family defined by blood or by last names, but by choices, by love, by commitment. A family built around a special boy, and the gardener who saw his light when no one else did. A family that proved that sometimes life's greatest gifts come wrapped in unexpected ways. Sometimes they arrive wearing a green uniform and a cap, carrying gardening tools, with no diplomas on the walls, but with a diploma of life engraved in the heart. End of story. And you, what did you think of this story of transformation and hope? Did you get emotional with the journey of Noah, Tyler, Elizabeth, and Barbara? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to trust your instinct against all opinions? Tell us in the comments. Don't forget to leave your like if the story touched your heart, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other emotional stories like this one.